Hey everyone, so I wanted to make a video on this topic because it's been something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately, especially having watched the latest two episodes of Caleb Hammer's podcast, Financial Audit, which, just in brief, it's a podcast where he brings on guests who are very, very poor in their own spending habits and personal finances with their debts, high interest rate credit cards, and all of that. And he generally just kind of roasts them for an hour and a half, and as of late, a lot of it's become much more kind of drama focused, especially when you have couples on. Um, he jokes that they call it the Caleb Springer show after Jerry Springer, but he still, I think, is a very interesting figure in the fact that I can't remember who said it, but it was a tweet where he's kind of like the big stopgap against populism. He's because he's incredibly intelligent, especially when it comes to like personal finances and economics. And he's very easily able to, both from the right and the left, just kind of swat down just baseless claims of, oh, this sounds like it's good, or this, I think people should do this, whether it's from right-wing conspiracy theorists like we're on the in the top video, or from blue-haired left-wing socialists in the bottom. Of it's kind of an interesting horseshoe theory of the most extreme on the right and the left. And again, I say this as somebody who definitely is on the far right, but towards the extremes, at least when you have extreme thinking, is you tend to have stronger opinions on things that you have basically no knowledge or understanding of. It's another reason why I really hate democracy. The fact that these people who have little grasp of reality, let alone things like economics or politics, are allowed to vote. And it kind of makes me, especially on the right, very critical of conspiratorial thinking. And especially as somebody who does genuinely think that the ruling elite that we have is quite malevolent. Um, but like, as an example, in the video, the wife of that couple that went on Caleb Hammer show, they're the whole literal flat earthers. Charlie Kirk is still alive. The Trump assassination was faked. Everything. And the whole, there's always the eternal they don't want you to know this. Who, they're always trying to cover this. And who is they? Who? Specific, like, something I would credit, at least our sphere of politics, there's at least specific people or specific policies we can point to, and you can actually use logic and reason to come to some form of concrete understanding of reality. Where she's a fundamentalist, you know, Christian who, even though she's, you would think, oh, sola scriptura, but she believes in the Book of Enoch anyway, even though that was centuries and centuries, even after that was written. I think it was written after the original Hebrew Bible was assembled, and it was rejected anyways, not part of the canon. She's like, oh no, they, this counts or whatever, took it out. King James took it out. And it makes it seem like, okay, so basically they think that for the entirety of human history, there's been some cabal of every elite, no matter how diametrically opposed politically they are, have always been just conspiring against the ordinary people. Like, they're like, oh, why don't you want people to know about the Book of Enoch? Oh, because it would prove creationism, and like, the elites don't want this. And you would think, now of course Caleb, the show is more about personal finance, so I think Caleb would rather not have to talk about it. But like, there's so little there to the argument. Like, how do you, like, okay, the elites didn't want people to believe in God. It's like, okay, I get it. Our modern elites suck. They're atheist, or they're non-Christian or anti-Christian, who have no actual basis in traditional morality or spirituality, which is kind of why I think predominantly that they're so bad. But okay, King James, when he helped assemble the King James Bible, he was not an atheist. He wasn't trying to get people to believe in evolution in the 1600s. I But I think it's largely a product, I think, of modern liberal democracy being the dominant civic religion. Because here's the thing, in our sphere that believe in elite theory, the idea that, oh, there's a cabal or a group of ruling elites that actually control things, that's just considered the normal of human history. Not only that, but I tend to think it's a good thing, at least in general. Or not even that, oh, it's good, it's this is just how every human society exists, because hierarchy also exists in nature. And so the idea of like, oh, there's this secret cabal of people that are controlling everything against the will of the people. It's like, okay, if you went back to ancient Egypt and they'd be like, and you said, hey, did you know, like, really, there's a secret power behind, behind everything, like the pharaoh and the priestly classes, they actually control everything, and your average Egyptian peasant would be like, well, yeah, like no kidding. It's only kind of now where you still have ruling elites, but there's the mask of democracy, and so it drives certain people insane because they think, no, there's no way it can be like this. That no, it's supposed to be some sort of free, democratic, liberal, classical liberal world that we live in. But hate to burst the bubble, it's not. Um, like they're the people that also think, like the husband saying like, oh, there's gonna be like the whole plan trusters to the extreme of, oh, Trump's he's gonna unearth all of it, he's gonna reveal everything, he's military tribunals are coming to arrest all of the bad people, and no. And I think it's that weird, it's the fact that we live in a society that has a ruling elite because all human societies have to have some form of hierarchy to them. But we're uniquely in the position that uh, because we have the illusion of democracy, people can, I think, look at it two ways when they realize, okay, democracy doesn't really work, or it's not really about voting or elections that influences politics as much as like we think it should. Sorry, there was a truck there. Um, and you can either take the conspiratorial route and go, oh, there's always been this psychopathic cabal of people throughout all of human history that have just been running things from behind the scenes, and it's the Freemasons, it's the Catholics, even though they're opposed to each other. I do love how much they hate the Catholic Church, because despite the Catholic Church being the one major institution on earth that is still, anti the most anti-abortion, anti-divorce, pro-traditional family, the only thing you could say, oh, they're bad on is immigration. It's like, okay, yeah, that's not a dogma of the church, but like the one organization that is explicitly spiritualistic, not materialistic, not psychopathic, pro humanity, like uh, so anti culture of death that recently it's been very much pro anti death penalty even, but not to get into that debate. Of course, because the Catholic Church has people that were in power in some way, and that they don't believe the same way as Pastor Jim of their Bible church that they go to. Pope Leo is of course part of the satanic cabal, despite being a pro-life Catholic, um, Catholic bishop. And it's funny is that these people, certain fundamentalists, I don't have anything against evangelicals, of course, in general, but some of them, they'll reject any idea of authority coming from the Catholic Church. But if Pastor Jim, who founded his church 5 years ago, or Derek from Facebook, who had his crazy ideas on the Book of Enoch, if Derek from Facebook says it's true, then obviously he's a good authority. And so the conspiratorial thinkers, the conspiracy theorists, like who genuinely believe in this stuff, okay, they see that democracy sucks and isn't actually, you know, the will of the people isn't really expressed via elections, or at least not nearly to the extent that we're made to, that we all try and pretend it is. Um, they go way too far, or they just go down a rabbit hole of, okay, that means, because there's actual ruling class now, that it must be connected to every ruling class that's ever existed, and every single one of them throughout all of human history must have been nefarious. Uh, well, in that case, the founding fathers were an elite ruling class of America at the time. They were the class of landed aristocrats and lawyers and professionals that basically were able to take over and found a country, which is kind of apt to talk about this as the 250th anniversary of our independence comes up. But, you know, was George Washington part of the elite? He was a Freemason. He was an elite, very wealthy landowner who was in power. Was he part of the secret cabal controlling everything? Who wasn't? Is there anybody who wasn't part of it? Um, and so, it basically turns you into complete. It makes you more than useless because first off, you make Christians and you make people on the right sound completely, incredulous of, like, either not taking it seriously or just being insane. Whereas, a bit of self flattery, but the people kind of in our sphere take it a different way of, okay, yeah, we think democracy sucks and doesn't fulfill the will of the people, but we understand that that's not really a reality that can ever actually exist. That there's always going to be an elites, and rather than say, okay, there needs to be some sort of populist uprising, it's much more of the actual groundwork of building our own institutions or infiltrating and becoming elites and trying to replace elites. That's actually how you win. And you actually have some basis in, like, I was listening to Oren McIntyre just the other day where he had on Ron Dodson or Donaldson. I can't remember his exact name, but they were talking about, and it's something I had thought about a lot, but he put it very, very well. It was going over a talk he had, Ron Dodson, on essentially the idea that the ancient Greeks, like Socrates and Plato, were formulating their own idea of God and even perhaps the Messiah that matches very close to what Christ was. And throughout the whole talk, like, they're actually having a basis in real classical philosophy and history, even talking about people that they don't agree with ultimately, like Leo Strauss, or Nietzsche, and not thinking, oh, they're just all part of some psycho cabal that's controlling everything. Because, like, with that thinking, you can't really. Chesterton had a good quote about this. It's like, okay, yeah, your worldview might be complete, but it's an incredibly small world. And so I think the antidote is to, like, conspiratorial thinking like that is having a good grounded dose in reality. And Caleb Hammer's not a bad way of doing that, where he will very level headedly, obviously with a lot of humor and just kind of roasting as well, just kind of go over, no, this isn't true, this isn't true, there is no evidence for any of this. um, Unfortunately, some people are just so set in my entire worldview exists around this, and I've never been taught any sort of critical thinking skills, that they just can't comprehend that, no, no, the world is round, and, you know, the the elites aren't, there isn't a endless conspiracy that's been going on since the beginning of time. I mean, there's sin, there've been bad people, of course, but there's not like the pharaohs, Alexander the Great, the Mongols, the Chinese emperors, the Romans. They weren't all connected as like as like all part of one secret plan to oppress people. And what's funny is that's kind of a similar view as Marxism. Like, if you view that of, okay, you just replace, the elites, ruling class Illuminati with, oh, the bourgeois or the capitalist class, like, that's, then you're basically in Marxism of, you just replace, like, oh, the ordinary people and the elites with, oh, the working class of the bourgeoisie. you kind of get your horseshoe theory coming around. And equally speaking, like the woman below in the latest video that he released today, I kind of has that same mindset of, I want socialism. Here's how I think all the world works. Of, you know, billionaires need to pay their fair share. I believe in socialism. I think all, and again, Caleb just going, spitting facts of no, not a single one of your economic claims has any basis in reality. In fact, the opposite of all of them are true. Like in terms of how much taxation billionaires pay into, like, what the actual economic opportunities are right now. And you can have some disagreement, sure, and even he will admit, yeah, certain things are bad, but none of her claims are true. But again, it's based on just this all-encompassing worldview that is very, very has almost no real basis in reality. Unlike, say, a classical, traditional Western understanding of philosophy, where you kind of have that line from the ancient Greeks to Christianity, all that stuff that I think, at least I like to think that I have, and that people in our sphere just kind of look to, is okay, we have this long-standing tradition. We actually like reason. We don't really believe in ideology in the same way that like a socialist does. And again, Caleb Hammer is also just very realistic and pragmatic, where he's like, I don't. It's not about the system. It's about the results. And the results are generally a free market system produces a flourishing, prosperous society. That's not perfect, but compared to when you try the idealistic, when you try the Marxist, the socialist utopia, well, you get mountains of corpses. And all I have to say is that it's why having a firm grounding in reality, suffice it to say, helps. Is that the conspiratorial nonsense, or the socialist Marxist conspiracy nonsense, it comes fundamentally from a rejection of the past. It comes from a rejection of, no, there's actually a set of like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, all of the all of my ancestors, or all of the people that were in power or writing in the past, I'm either just going to cherry pick and think. Again, it's interesting how like both like QAnon conspiracy theorist on the right or a Marxist on the left have a very similar framework of, throughout all of history, there's been some sort of secret group of evil people collaborating to oppress everybody else. When in reality, no, that's just how humanity works. There's going to be a hierarchy. If you don't want that, well, then you can either, you have that in heaven, you have that in the Garden of Eden, or you have that in, if you're not going to use a religious, if you're not religious, well, you have that in, at least to more of a degree, because even then, even in apes, even in the animal kingdom, there's hierarchy. Like, there's gonna be a head ape, there's gonna be a biggest gorilla. Animals vie for dominance all the time. They've both within their own species and with other species. Like, if they want total equality, they would say that, okay, there shouldn't be predator animals, even though predator and prey is just natural. So they're going against reality itself, which again, most leftist thinking, you can draw your own conclusions of. Most of their viewpoints today are pretty anti-reality. But yeah, it comes back to the idea of, if you think that, if there's a takeaway from this video, my video, of course, that you all watch and love and share and subscribe, it's that if you're raised to understand that there shouldn't be an elite, when you actually do see an elite, you don't see it as a natural structure that's inherent to any human society or organization. You see it as the great enemy. And so that's why I think a lot of this thought is so prominent now, because people have been raised to think that, okay, we should be in some sort of pure meritocratic democracy where there aren't really like these class divides. Whereas if we were, say, living in, I don't know, what a lot of us reactionaries like, say, post Napoleonic Europe, if we were in like 1830s Austria, and it'd be like, hey, if I was to say, hey, you know who really controls the Austrian Empire? It's the Habsburgs, it's the aristocrats. No, duh. Obviously, that's true. And ultimately, I think in that case, it's a good thing. Because there's never really any idea or that, hey, you actually could have a good elite. And again, part of the elite theory, it's that, or at least as I view it, is yeah, our elites. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's pretty reasonable to understand. Okay, we live in a post-Christian society, so the elites that rule us now are post-Christian and aren't really bound by that morality, and that's why they suck. They reject most of the traditional values and don't really have the same restraints that, say, monarchs and nobility of Europe's past did. Um, and so, with that, going back to say, like, if we were living in the 1830s, you know, if we were living in America, hey, we would have still had an elite of the wealthy. But guess what? I don't think anybody's going to say that America circa 1830 was like run by an evil globalist Illuminati. And so they can't really point to like a specific date of when this started because again they'll be like, well, current government evil cabal, and it's gone back King James, or they would basically say every monarch, every leader that they didn't like was part of the evil ruling class. And so those are just kind of my thoughts. I hope it was a bit more coherent than I've been lately, but I just find it interesting the idea that both on the extreme left and the extreme right, like Marxism and QAnon are actually really quite similar to each other in their rejection of reality and forming an entire ideology and understanding of the world based on the fact that they don't like that there's a hierarchy. So, anyways, those are my thoughts. Please let me know in the comments. Love you all. God bless.